Ladies and gentlemen, as I've been warning for weeks, pain is coming. Yesterday, I covered Trump now imposing 30% tariffs on South Africa, with another 10% threatened on top of that for all BRICS nations. That would put us at 40%. That's going to hurt. In this video, I'm going to speak to a number of people who I've seen in my comments, I see on Twitter every single day, or X rather, every single day. People claiming that we don't need America, that America needs to leave us alone because we can do our own thing and it doesn't even matter. Normally, and I do agree that South Africa must forge its own path and South Africa must learn how to stand on its own 2 feet. But in my opinion, that should go about things like aid, things like free money that's given to the country. We should move away from that. Just want to say a huge thank you to all of the supporters and patrons of this channel. By becoming a member or a patron, you help support the news that we bring and also allow me to do even more in the future. So huge shout out to all of you. Thank you. Anyways, enjoy the video. Bye. No country has ever gotten rich through foreign aid. In fact, if you look at the track record of foreign aid, it tends to make countries a hell of a lot poorer. That does not mean that countries can exist without foreign trade. It does not mean that countries can exist without other countries with which they can rub shoulders and sort of rub off on one another. Of course, in South Africa, that seems to be a threat from Donald Trump that falls on deaf ears consistently. Here you have Lamola basically saying to Trump, go kick rocks.
Indeed, it's a strong testament of our commitment to ensure that the Global South does develop and is able to stand on its own. Indeed, we have seen the statement, the tweet from President Trump, and we think that it is very important that the BRICS partners and members continue and forge ahead in line with the declaration, in line with our commitment.
It's interesting to note, though, that Xi Jinping was not at this meeting. He completely skipped it, as well as the heads of state for Saudi Arabia. They were also not there. As far as the members of BRICS go, it was only South Africa, India, and the host nation's president of Brazil that was at this summit. Ordinarily, this summit is very, very important. And every single country sends their heads of state because it's supposed to be a show of strength. Since the announcement by Donald Trump of an increase of 10% tariffs on all countries part of the BRICS initiative, I think some of these countries have started to get a bit of a cold feet idea on some of this stuff, right? And then you have, for example, another sort of sign that America is done playing with South Africa. Here you have the U.S. Treasury Scott Bessent, that now will skip the G20 meeting in South Africa, and basically he's going to Japan instead. So the US is effectively telling South Africa, you've screwed around, now you're about to find out. It gets even worse when you realize that Trump is about to impose 50% tariffs on copper. This is wholesale across the board because America does have a lot of copper and it would prefer to get its own copper from the earth rather than copper from other countries. That doesn't mean that there isn't room to negotiate this. If you have a good relationship with America, you could tell Trump, hey, what if we did this for you, then you take our copper and you don't charge us 50%? And Trump would likely go for that deal. He likes making deals. But here, I think, is where we get to why China completely snubbed the meeting. This is Donald Trump saying, we have a really good relationship with China lately, and we're getting along with them very well. They've been very fair on our trade deals, honestly, Trump said, adding that he is speaking regularly with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, for those of you thinking, well, this isn't good, why is the Chinese selling us out? The Chinese was always in this only for themselves. I asked yesterday on X to my followers, what even is the point of BRICS? Outside of antagonizing the USA, which it happens to do, what is BRICS? Because let's just quickly go through the list of countries of BRICS, shall we? You have Russia. They're currently at war. Their economy is struggling, and they're transitioning to a wartime economy. That's not an economy that you can trade with or rely on for aid, right? So Russia is out. Then you have India. India plays both sides. India has made it super clear they're not against America. They're not against BRICS. They're sort of happy to just do everything. Brazil, way too small player to even matter in this case. Xi Jinping, really only in it for themselves, right? The Chinese only care about China. They don't really care about anyone else. And all they'll do is in the best interest of China, right? So that leaves you with South Africa, Iran, which is very, very small and non existent, and Saudi Arabia, which also plays for both sides. So again, the question becomes, what even is the point of BRICS? You have people like John Steenhuisen that did come out yesterday and basically say, we're in trouble, right? And he says, whilst not explicit, the announcement would signal the end of the African Growth and Opportunities Act, AGOA. Now more than ever, it highlights the need for urgent reform in South Africa that we can ensure that our economy meets the requirements of our trading partners around the world. I look forward to working with others in the coming weeks to urgently seek a way past this and ensure that we can avoid a 30% tariff on our agricultural sector. Steenhuisen will be able to do nothing because the demands from Donald Trump and from America has nothing to do with Steenhuisen. They want BE gone. They want farm murders to be of the highest priority. They want all duties, tariffs, and non-tariff barriers to economic trade with South Africa to be gone. This means the South African government would have to give up taxes. They'd have to remove taxes. Have they ever removed taxes in the entire history of this government? No, they just keep lobbying them. But okay, so let's look at the argument that we can move past this. We can find other partners. We can trade with other people. So let's very quickly look. This is the GDP of every nation on Earth. As you will see, America is by far the largest. We can add a couple of these other countries quickly to the list, and you'll just quickly see what we're talking about here, right? You have China, America. Let's just add America in here. You have America. Look at where their economy is. This is where China is, quite a ways down. And this is where the third country on the list is. If you're going to replace American trade, you can't replace it with China. China is already buying everything they need from us. They're already our largest trading partner, although they export to us way more than what we export to them. But, nevertheless, so you're going to have to go to places like Germany. You're going to have to try and look for places like Japan. Look how far they're down. So Japan and Germany not doing anything for you, not in terms of size. But maybe it's not about that. Maybe it's about GDP per capita. Well, even here, you will note that the only countries ahead of the United States on GDP per capita are countries that are ridiculously small. In other words, they have what is in economics referred to as a very tiny consumer base, right? No one's really buying this stuff. Then when we actually look at consumption, so we look at the consumer spending within these various different countries, you will find that America once again outperforms the whole of the rest of the world. And if you were to take consumer spending, so this is literally the stuff that consumers will buy from you, right? You put China, Japan, Germany, the United Kingdoms, and literally almost every other country down the list here, and they still don't reach the USA. So when you have goods that you want to sell, you want to get it into the United States because United States consumers buy more than any other country on Earth. This is further exacerbated by the fact that China doesn't really have a consumer economy. For example, China's total GDP is made up of about 40% is consumer spending. The rest is exports. This compared to the United States, where about 68% of its total GDP is made up of consumer spending. So clearly, that's not going to work. So we can't find another partner to trade with. But it gets even worse when people say we just don't need the US. Look at this map. This is a map of all of these, as live as it's happening, of all of the large vessels traveling across the oceans. And you'll see there's thousands of them. These are just the largest ones, right? And you can see these are the shipping lanes, the ones that's brightly colored. These are shipping lanes to and from various countries. These shipping lanes are in open waters for the most part. What does that mean? It means they need protection. They need someone to make sure that they don't get attacked by pirates. that if there's something going wrong, there will be someone to respond. And the country that does this is the United States of America. These are the naval bases of the United States military around the world. And as you will see, each of these military bases or naval bases is in line with these very large trading routes. The United States has the largest naval sort of force in the world at about 290 ships. Their navy is specifically designed to protect the oceans and free trade, because that was what was agreed during the Bretton Woods Agreement. In the Bretton Woods Agreement, America effectively told the world, hey, if all of you promise to use the dollar as your reserve currency, we'll protect your ships so that you can trade with us and we can trade with you. That was the agreement that the world signed. And once that agreement was signed, the whole world sat back and started trading and started making money. The United States started building ships, to the point where the United States is one of a handful of countries that have what would be called as open navies. In other words, they can sail across the deep blue sea. They don't just patrol coastal waters. The only other navies that can do that is the UK with a very tiny navy, and I believe Finland or Norway may have that as well. Most other countries, even China, for example, they don't have an open navy. Their navy is specifically designed for the South China Sea and to attack Taiwan at some point. That's pretty much it. So in terms of protection for naval or for shipping lanes, you need the US. If the US were to suddenly say, sorry, we're no longer protecting the sea lines going to and from South Africa, all of those ships that you currently see moving to and from South Africa disappears overnight, because no company is going to take the risk of sending their ships across open waters with literally no one to protect them. Thus far, this is a strategy that the US has never employed, but they could. Then you go to satellites, because this is another service that the United States provides pretty much the whole of the world, and that is giving weather updates, making sure that these ships are sailing in safe waters. All of this data, most of it at least, comes from the US, because they are the country with the most satellites on Earth. As you can see, there are 8,530 satellites constantly orbiting the Earth, making sure that you get the most up-to-date resources possible. So now we've covered all of the bases. There are no countries that you can export to that will replace the US in terms of spending, in terms of what they're willing to buy. It's not as if there are a bunch of countries in this world that is just waiting for South Africa to have more products to send. Every country in the world is already taking the products that they want from South Africa. So when South Africa loses America, it's not like those products can go somewhere else. Some of it might, but most of it will just end up here, right? With farmers having nowhere to put this stuff and no one to consume it, which means a lot of job losses. So you can't replace the US as a trading partner. You can't replace the US in terms of safety that they provide you for the literal ships that's meant to trade with other countries. If they remove you from their protection list, you're done, right? So you can't do that. It's going to take almost 2 decades for you to build a navy that might be able to protect you, if not more, because any one of these destroyers that you need to protect these shipping lanes will take anywhere from 24 to 36 months at best to build, and you can't build multiple of them at the same time, because they're highly technological ships and they require a crap ton of resources to build. So you're going to need about 2 decades just to set up for this. You can't replace them in terms of the data that they provide, because no other country even comes close. And a lot of the other countries that do have satellites tend to have war satellites, or satellites that's very specific for specific things. And then you have another problem, and that is that the Chinese economy is in a transition period. There's a new reality that is starting to set in, and that is that the Chinese economy is no longer growing. While consumer spending did go up during the first sort of 2 decades of the freedom of China, it has now completely stagnated in China. And China is now in a massive slowdown period. It needs to be noted that the majority of the Chinese citizenry still live in abject poverty. China is a very top-heavy country, and China's main export, 60% of it, or China's main GDP is exports. It's producing, it's manufacturing stuff. Now, with Trump no longer wanting to buy because the Americans are the number one trading partner of China, with the Americans no longer interested in buying Chinese goods, that puts the Chinese economy in a place where it is not ready to be. So when people give you this line that, oh, we'll just replace the US, we don't need the US, it's because they're not thinking of all of the ways in which you do need the US. I'm not suggesting that South Africa should bend over backwards and try to make space for the US so that the US can get whatever they want, but there are ways to deal with this. There are ways to be nice to the Americans whilst also pursuing your own goals. India is a great example of this. Thus far, India has stayed completely neutral on all things. They don't involve themselves in the war in Ukraine. They don't involve themselves in the war in the Middle East. They just keep quiet. They don't antagonize the US over BRICS. They don't antagonize the BRICS over the US. They just sort of trade with both, do their business, and try to come to agreements where possible. India is on the verge of signing a massive trade deal with the United States amidst joining the BRICS nations. So we have South Africa cannot exist without American trade, as I have showcased in this video. You have a BRICS sort of agreement that seems to be on rocky grounds and seems to be wholly useless. So when people tell you that, oh, we don't need America, show them this video. As always, let me know in the comment section down below how you feel about all of this. Do you agree, disagree? I'd love to read your thoughts. As always, hit the like if you liked, the dislike if you didn't, and I'll see all of you in the next one. Peace.